afternoon. And you said, if I remember correctly, that self-enquiry is the highest approach to search for happiness.
Yes.
As Jane.
It's always Jane that is searching.
It's always
for
Jane,
happiness.
yeah. So it's no problem, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Mary is happiness. She doesn't need to
she
search
doesn't,
for happiness.
So my question is, why this is so, and how do you compare it to other approaches like meditation or like psychotherapy?
Yes.
Even spiritual psychotherapy,
yes.
or
yes.
ayahuasca.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
So if you can explain the reason behind this statement, I mean, the motivation behind it.
Because the direct path, what we discuss here, the direct path or self-enquiry, is the direct path from Jane to Mary, from King Lear to John Smith. Yes? Now, as I said to Amy earlier, most people, most Janes, and Mary, remember, is happiness. So what Jane is always seeking, whether she knows it or not, is Mary, which is the essence of her own mind. Yeah, but Jane, in most cases, doesn't know that, so she starts seeking objects and substances, activities, relationships. When those fail, she usually turns to some kind of religious or spiritual tradition, and then she's taught about prayer and mantras and yoga and all sorts of techniques, which are simply refinements of her previous search for happiness in objects. They give Jane a mantra to focus on, or the breath to focus on, or a teacher to devote herself to, or a flame, or a posture to adopt. They give her some kind of objective experience, albeit more refined than the objects in which she previously used to search for happiness, but nevertheless still objects of experience. Even very noble objects of experience, a God outside of ourself. But they are still objects. In other words, Jane is still directing her attention away from its source towards an object, albeit a very refined one, for the purpose of finding happiness. Now, this may be a necessary and legitimate halfway step for Jane, because at the moment her mind is too accustomed to seeking happiness in objects to be able to turn around immediately. So out of compassion, the teaching says to Jane, okay, don't turn around and face your source, just focus on a mantra. Just focus on your breath. Just devote yourself to a teacher. Just repeat this repetition, this japa, or whatever it is. And this steadies Jane's mind. She's no longer jumping from one object to another relationship, the next object, etc. Her mind is now steady. And when her mind is steady, the teaching says to her, okay, now let go of that object. Let go of the mantra, or the flame, or the breath, or this is when the teacher usually kicks the student out. Or, in other words, let go of the focus of your attention from objects and allow your attention to begin to sink inwards, not objectwards, but selfwards, because that is where the source of happiness is. Jane is beginning to trace her way back to Mary's mind. Mary is happiness. There is nowhere else where it is possible to find happiness. Mary is happiness. So here, as Jane, we just go directly, not via an object. We go directly from Jane, that is us, our finite mind, to Mary, that is the essence or the source of our minds. That's why it's called the direct path. And what is called self-enquiry, it means an investigation into the self that we essentially are. And eventually, all paths come down to self-inquiry, because all paths, all spiritual traditions involve this dissolution of the sense of separation, Jane, in what the Buddhists called original mind, what the Christians called God's infinite being. It doesn't matter what we call it, but they all involve the dissolution of Jane in her essence or source. So here we just go to the source directly. We don't go via an object, a mantra, a flame, a teacher, etc. So that is why it is not only direct, because it doesn't go via an object all the way back to yourself. It just goes directly from yourself to yourself. And it's the shortest path, because to go via an object always requires going from ourself a certain distance in space or time to an object. But there is no distance from ourself to ourself. That's why it's called a pathless path or an effortless path. So that is why also it is the highest path. It is the straightest, the most direct, the quickest, because it is timeless. The most efficient, the simplest, the easiest. However, if it seems to be difficult for us because of the agitation of our mind, then it is legitimate to take a halfway step and to focus the mind on a mantra or on the breath or on the body or something like that. I'm not criticizing those practices. I'm just placing them in the broader context of the entire spiritual process. And it's not a coincidence that most people here, not those of you that are very young, but most people here have been on a spiritual path for 10, 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50 years. This is the cream. It's the home straight, the final furlong. And most people, and this was certainly true of me, and many, many people that I know, most people have been prepared for this path in some other tradition, Buddhist, Sufi, Christian, and they have at some point feel they meet the limit of that tradition. And then, because there is this connection between the inside and the outside, very often when we feel we meet that limit, somehow we get introduced to the direct path. But some people, and I notice this more and more, some young people don't require this preparation for the direct path. I notice that more and more young people are coming to it whose minds are not only unburdened with previous religious and spiritual paraphernalia, but they're unburdened by the suffering that so many older people carry around. So they come with this freshness and cleanness and innocence, and they hear the teaching once and they just say, yes, that makes sense. There's so little obstruction. I've seen that in many young people.
Thank you.